Everyone. Okay, so thank you and good morning to everyone who is here. If you guys don't know, this is the Track 1 Care and Support, so I'm very lucky and honored to be hosting the first one. I'm very excited about that. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Ashley Yee. I'm the manager of advocacy programs at Global Genes. And also we want to just thank our sponsors, Mallinckrodt, for sponsoring our previous break. I hope you guys learned a lot from our opening sessions. I'm really excited to be hosting this one and being able to present for Kathleen Kelly and Grace Whitting, who will be presenting on this topic. So I guess without further ado, I would like to present Grace Whitting, the Director of Strategic Partnerships for the National Alliance for Caregiving, and Kathleen Kelly, the Executive Director for the Family Caregiver Alliance and National Center of Caregiving.
So much. I'm really excited to be here. Like she said, my name is Grace. I've been coming to Global Genes for about 3 years. And one of the things that I want you guys to know about is the first time I came to the Global Genes Summit, I was incredibly moved by the people who are caring for a friend, a family member with rare disease, and the amount of sophistication that this community has in articulating the challenges of that type of caregiving in the rare space. And it's a different world than what we see in dementia or caring for an older adult or caring for somebody with a functional disability. So I'm just really excited to be here and talk to you guys today. I've had the privilege of, at my current organization, doing a workshop at NIH on rare disease and terminal illness and the caregiving process through end of life. So I'm really excited today to talk to you more broadly about caregiving and to present with one of the leading national experts in family caregiving in the United States. So I don't want to brag too much and embarrass her, but Kathy is one of the prominent experts in family caregiving in the U.S. Her organization is the oldest family caregiving organization in the U.S., and she does both direct services to family caregivers and public policy research. So she knows both sides of the coin. Now I'm going to start and talk to you a little bit about just who the National Alliance for Caregiving is, which is my shop. So we're a 501c3. We're primarily known for our public policy research, although we also do work in innovation and advocacy. And we have a network of state and local caregiving coalitions, and we do some international work. And I'll just show you guys, because I love show and tell. This is an example of the kind of things we do. Beautiful plane reading, right? Like, I can't wait to get on the plane and read all of these data, these beautiful data and charts. But the reason I want you to get excited about this is because we use these data and charts when we go and talk to the White House, when we talk to members of Congress, when we talk to HHS or the FDA, and we say, this is why caregiving matters. We are taking the information we have and aggregating it so that you can see the big picture. And so what I'm going to talk to you a little bit about before we dive in is that we are working with Global Genes to create this in the rare disease space so that we can tell your story to people who are policymakers and who are trying to make change in Washington and around the world. The first thing I just want to kind of put in your mind, and actually before I do this, let me ask you guys a question. Can I see a show of hands, who's caring for somebody that has a rare disease? Okay, and does anybody in the room have a rare disease? And does that person, will you raise your hand if you've got someone that helps you out with just your daily living or your health care? Yeah, so it's amazing. It's amazing how much caregiving touches all of us. I think one of the challenging things that I've just noticed sitting in on these meetings the last couple of years is that we talk a lot about what the patient needs. And sometimes people will say, if we make life better for the person who's got the health condition, then automatically everything gets better for the caregiver. So what I want you to start thinking about is that's true. If we make life better for the patient, it is going to make life better for the caregiver, but the caregiver also has separate needs, right? So if you're, and you guys know this better than I, if you're caring for someone, you want information about how to provide care. You want to be a trusted member of the healthcare team. So maybe that means people have put you into the medical records so that you don't have to constantly ask for permission to see, the next file. you might need workplace flexibility so that you can take time off of work to go to a doctor's appointment or to take a break. And related to that, I would say respite, which is something that this summit I think does really well, give you a chance to like relax and enjoy your time, but also respite to take care of yourself and your other needs. And then there's also, I think, that financial emotional support. So although they're related, sometimes the caregiver needs a focus just on them. And that's really hard to do. So I was at a meeting at the White House. We were celebrating caregivers of veterans who've come back from 9/11. And I remember I was standing there, and I'm from a really small town in Mississippi. So I'm just like, wow, you know, like who would have thought here I am? I'm here in the White House. I'm so excited. So I'm standing here, I'm looking out at all the tourists. And one of the caregivers was standing there with me. One of the women, her husband was wounded. And she said to me, I said, isn't this great? You know, this is so beautiful. And she said, all I can think about is my husband who's back in the hotel room and if he's okay. And I just feel like so often when we talk about people who are doing this type of care, I hear it over and over again that you guys don't say to yourself, well, maybe I need care too. And so I think that's something that when we're telling that big story we want to come across, but we also want to focus on. So we don't know a lot about rare disease caregiving right now. We know a lot in specific areas of diseases, but not in the aggregate. This was a study that Shire did with about 256 caregivers, and it did reveal that caregivers had high rates of emotional and psychological stress. And it broke it down into depression, anxiety, isolation from family and friends, and worry about sort of the future outlook of the disease. What's going to happen since we don't, in some of these diseases, we don't know the natural pathway. It looks so different from person to person. We would say that there's other unique needs of rare disease caregivers that look different than the person that might be caring for somebody with dementia or another type of special health care need. So one of those would be length of time to diagnosis or misdiagnosis. Uncertainty, so the stress of not knowing what the disease progression is going to look like. Risk-benefit analysis. So an example of this might be in the Duchenne's community. You know, some of the therapies that are coming available, they have a high risk to them. It's not clear how safe they are. So what is the tolerance for these types of medications and new therapies and innovations if you know that the person who is taking that medicine might get better or might get much worse. And I think that's something, this is in all types of healthcare, but in rare disease, because there are not as many medicines available, it becomes a bigger issue. Related to that, access to therapies and clinicians, participation in clinical trials. Let me ask you guys, has anybody in the room participated in a clinical trial? Yeah, so, you know, it's sort of, I'm smiling because one of the things I hear over and over again in Washington is how do we get people to participate in clinical trials? But in the rare space, it's almost, in many cases, it feels like because there are no therapies, this becomes the way of seeking treatment. And that is unique and also a unique barrier because clinical trials are not the most accessible way to receive medical care. And then, you know, the last thing I would say is when there is an illness that has a short prognosis, thinking about palliative care and other types of treatment. And we would also say that caregivers play a major role in managing sort of health care and medication and some of the specialty issues around rare disease. There was a woman I met last year that talked about she actually downloaded the standard of care, the nursing standard of care, so that she could read it and understand what she needed to do for her son. So that's sort of unique to this community. So why did I tell you all that? I told you all that because we want to create a big study on rare disease caregivers like this, and we need people who are excited about that and want to help participate. So we're currently working with Global Genes. It's in development, but when we have it ready to go, there will be a survey, and we're going to ask people who are caring for somebody to participate. And this is a way to have your voice be included in a larger conversation about what we need to do for rare disease families in order to improve caregiving in America. So I can talk to you more after that. I won't spend too much time on it, but I do have flyers if you're interested and you want to get involved or you know people that might want to get involved. The last thing I just included was some caregiver resources. So I believe these slides will be available to you, but these are different resources that might be helpful to you if you're trying to think about where can I get help. And some of them you may have come across before and some maybe not. I would also say some of these groups have online support groups, and those can be really helpful. And I know many of you are participating already in online support groups or Facebook groups for your condition. So I would check some of these out and if they might be helpful. And then I'm actually going to end it right there, but I'm wondering if anybody has any questions before I pop down the stage and we get to the fun stuff. No questions. Does anybody want to share anything about their caregiving experience? You guys are shy.
I think in our situation, my son has a rare disorder called bilateral irritable diarrhea, and basically it means he has too many holes in the brain and too small. The majority of kids never talk. A lot of them are GI fed. Seizures are about 90% of them, and walking and that kind of thing is difficult. So where we are on that spectrum, he is walking. We're missing some teeth and have some stitches, but we are walking. So because he is able to be mobile, like nursing care and that kind of stuff is not, we don't technically need it. However, he's a 3-year-old in like a 6-year-old body, which scares the crap out of me, thinking, never in a million years would I wish, to like shrink my son or have him, be much smaller. But he's 3 and he's a size 6. What is he going to be at 6, And, I'm starting to have, issues with my shoulders and that kind of thing because they're tearing because you're holding because he's not stable to walk. And so that's probably our biggest challenge because I don't need that, we don't qualify for that care, but I do see, especially down the road, I'm only so strong, and how am I going to make sure that he stays safe within his environment?
Anybody else want to say anything before? Okay.
Wow, that was kind of... my name is Shannon Machine Chi, and my son has myotubular myopathy. He is 14, and I think that as I was listening to what you were saying, I think about how isolating it is as families. I'm sure we all experience this, and the idea that you live your life, and for you, that's your normal life, which may involve suction machines, and for us, ventilator and all those types of things. And other people look and say, wow, that's just so hard. And it's like, well, so is having a regular 14-year-old. That's really hard because I've had that too. And, the idea, but then also how isolating it is. I think my son just had a seizure 18 months ago, which was devastating, caused cardiac arrest, and he's like, it's like he's back in his 2-year-old body. And I think about for the 18 months that he was home, he never had a friend come and visit, and how hard that is to feel like, not only as a parent are you isolated, but how isolated our children are too, and how that puts a whole nother level onto you. And especially when he was younger, it was easier because he was smaller. It was easier to get him out more. It was easier, now he can't move as much. So it's, his 100 pounds feels like 5,000 pounds. And moving him is more difficult, and his energy is way less. And so he's going to school. He just went back to school for the first time in 18 months, and he goes for 4 hours a day. And that is exhausting for him, And so I feel like that piece is never really talked about. It's not only how isolated you are, but you're trying to move forward with your life on a regular basis. And so people think everything's fine. They're like, oh, you're doing great. And you're like, yes, by myself, doing awesome, me and my child. And I think that people forget about that part.
So we'll do one more, but I think we're going to have some opportunities to talk a little bit more, and I want to make sure Kathy has time to walk you through the exercise, which will be a helpful way to think about how you can begin to care for yourself.
Well, I have a couple of things I could share, but I'll just go with one. My name is Tom Cox, and my daughter has Wagner syndrome. It's so exceedingly rare. There's maybe 250 people in the world. Today's her 19th birthday. She's a cancer survivor. She's legally blind. We've just come through a second season that I call major medical in our lives, where she had 5 surgeries 3 states away in a period of 1 year, 4 of them in 6 months. And I guess the one comment or question I'll share is, there may be a song, "This is a man's world," but that ain't my experience. So I'm interested in what somebody could speak to as far as caregivers and men. I mean, I've had to advocate within our organization because men are sort of silent partners. I could go on, but I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, thank you for that comment. I mean, we know from the national data that men and women care a little bit differently, which sounds weird, not in an emotional sense, but that sometimes the task of caregiving look different, that men tend to do, and this is on average in the aggregate, men tend to do sort of the financial piece, the sort of, you think of it like the fix-it type of activities, whereas women tend to do more of the physical, the high touch, the bathing, the feeding, the dressing, but that's certainly not true across the board. And I think there's also just now beginning to be more conversation about how we address men who also process things differently, want different kinds of support groups. Or one of my colleagues says, don't call it a support group if it's for men, it's a meeting. We're going to a meeting. So, I mean, there's a lot of sensitivities there that are still being explored. And Kathy certainly, I think, could maybe speak to that too.
Great, thank you, Grace. I think your comments were all wonderful. Get up on the platform here. And I have to say, you know, I've been in the field for quite a while, and the kinds of things that you're talking about sort of in the general way is not unusual across the kinds of disabilities and diagnoses that we see on a daily basis at Family Caregiver Alliance. Slightly different nuances, to be sure, but in the aggregate, actually relatively the same. Let me get my slide. Okay, I'm going to ask for help. So I just have 2 things I really want to talk about today, and that is a little bit about who we are and the project that we're involved in right now. And I'm showing you this because it's not necessarily titrated to the kinds of issues that you're dealing with on.
You can show the video first.
No, I'll call you up for that. I have a little video insert. Thank you. But it's a way in which, if you could think about all of the services and supports that we've had through the years that form our sort of constellation, are actually services and supports that many of you are lacking in a consistent way. I don't know why that is. I think, you know, when you look at the history of the caregiver movement, the family caregiver movement, it really evolved out of largely folks that were dealing with Alzheimer's disease and related dementias. And so most of the interventions, most of the work has gone, that has passed for the past, you know, 20 or 30 years sort of has been built on that sort of bedrock of understanding. However, many of the things that are considered sort of standard practice in terms of the kinds of services that family needs are all things that you probably will need at one time or another. So I'm going to talk about it only in relationship to that. Although I do think that what we lack in the caregiver world in a general way is a population sample database of caregiver experiences in the real time. We have wonderful reports and surveys that come out of NAC, but we lack a consistent database across the country, and that's a really powerful tool to use. I have a little plaque on in my office, and it said, "In God we trust, everyone else has to bring data." And that's because you know, your personal stories are really compelling, but when you go to make policy, you really need the data behind it in order to drive the solution forward. And so we need both. Both are equal, but the data is the hardest, it's very difficult to drive. So Family Caregiver Alliance, as Grace said, we've been around for about 40 years. We started here in California, our office is in San Francisco. We started a whole caregiver resource center system for caregivers of persons with adult onset cognitive disorders. So we had a variety of different disabilities and diseases at onset at different ages, and different ages of family caregivers as well. However, when I walked in, I have to say that I'm a newbie. This is the first time I've been to this conference, and I saw that there were 7,000 disorders, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm not going to get an acronym test. I couldn't be able to even begin to understand all of them. But at any rate, we did legislation and established a pilot project of services. They've formed the core of the replication. These are now kind of standard practice of what we think about in terms of caregiver support. So that's what we've done so far. Where's the, oh, it's on the top, okay. Okay, so Care Journey is our latest product. Again, I'm showing you this because it sort of gives an outline of the kinds of things that we consider standard practice now, which I think, you know, you all should be advocating for to have this available to you too. Again, these are coming out of largely driven by the aging network and aging services. But when we looked at caregiving problems, you know, we don't have a scale of these interventions or services. They're just not available all across the country in equal ways. We also know that families have big time deficits, that you're constantly, every day, you're doing different activities at 5 and 15-minute chunks, and basically you're putting out fires all the time. So there's a lack of time. We don't really understand quality as it's driven by these services, and of course I've talked about data. So what Care Journey is, it's an online, we developed it as an online product, mobile-enabled product, that really is a systems approach to combining the data and the services to deliver tailored support. So not everybody needs all things at all times. You need one thing at one time, tailored to what your need is at that particular moment. We know that people are using mobile applications, so that's why we're driving it there. But really, it revolves around a uniform assessment and a tailored personal caregiver record that gives all the information, including the kinds of services, information that we have, and also training. And training not delivered in big hunks of time, but training broken down into the tasks and sort of what we call micro-learning units. So if you're really looking at, I just need something about brushing teeth comes up. So this is the way that, you know, all this kind of information is evolving and training is evolving. So, and then we have interventions. Interventions that I think actually could help a lot of all of you sitting here, but they need to be made different. They can't be a dementia-related intervention. It needs to be made different for your needs. But what I'm saying to you is that the skeleton of the service intervention, the bedrock of that has already been built out. And I think that it really behooves us to advocate for more research so we can tailor that to meet more global needs in this particular space. And we also need data collection. Does what we do really make a difference? And that's the thing that drives the outcomes and also the payment for services. So I'm not going to spend too much time. It's on our website. We're in beta testing right now. Anyone can go on and use the information in the standard intake. It's not really pretty yet, so I'm just giving you a word of warning. But every day we're working on it to make it better. This is what's called a standard intake. You've all been through intakes for various reasons, but this is actually an intake that asks questions of you, the family caregiver. You can do it online and self-administer. We'll do it on the phone. So that's the standard intake. And the assessment, these are expanded kinds of questions. And I'm going to talk about that only because I want you to get an idea about the data that's being collected. It culminates in an action plan for families. according to what you want to work on. We may see all sorts of flags in the data and in the conversations that we're having with families individually, but families want to start, a caregiver wants to start where they want to start, and that's where we go. And so this is the action plan. And you always have access to a dashboard that has all of your resources, the action plan, any other kinds of services, calendar of training events, and so on in this mode. I make mention of this because, again, this is a framework for operationalizing this across any kind of disability. It doesn't really make any difference. The information needs to be tailored, of course. Some of the questions need to be, in the assessment might need to be tailored, but the framework for it is already there. So when we're talking about the data, and you'll see that when you answer the online questionnaire, many of these kinds of questions will come up in the questionnaire as well, because they're called what we would term as standard practice. We want to know a little bit about, obviously the demographics, length of caregiving, do you or do you not live with a care receiver, the person needing assistance. And again, these are normed for our world where we're largely dealing with an older population of persons with disabilities. In the assessment, it's far more expanded, and those are for folks that we work with on a really intimate level, a more intense level in the San Francisco Bay Area. But the questions that we're asking are about activities of daily living, IADLs, medical tasks, which is not normally asked. So someone said, you live in the world of suctions and equipment and things. Surprisingly, that's not asked anywhere. It's like medical tasks didn't actually exist. So we made a measure in there to talk about medical tasks, technology readiness for individuals wanting to use that in the home, behavioral issues, and so on. Under planning care, health insurance and conditions, legal and financial planning are things that are oftentimes asked, and I think will probably be asked in some of the online questionnaires in a certain sense, for certain questions, excuse me. And sources of paid and unpaid help, and I'm going to do a little a dialogue about how you might be able to do that for yourself. In terms of self-care, this is where we talk about what's the stress of the caregiver, what are the depression levels, all the things that you saw in the outcomes of the questionnaire, as well as what's the healthcare utilization as well. Those are all things that come up in family systems that make an impact on you day after day after day. So these are just units of service. So what happens is that you do a service, we track it to the record, and then we understand what's been used by families in terms of the services and supports that we offer. We can track actions through the site itself, so we know what's going on in the Care Journey site and what you've done in terms of the Learning Center, because it's all trackable on an online basis. The construct of being able to tag this to a client record is one that we have about 20 years of experience, because we collected a population sample of over 40,000 of these pieces of information when we were doing analysis for the California State program. And it's really important to know, because it gives us an idea about the range of things that people may need at what time. So in the era of big data, we're actually pretty data scarce in the caregiving world. We don't have this kind of information. Evaluations, these are all things that we're looking at now. I talked about those. What we're doing now is we've launched it. We're doing the online learning community, which is these micro learning modules, as well as other components. We have about 140 different pieces of consumer content right now. We have 3 pilots, a national, one in the San Francisco Bay Area, and one in Los Angeles, and we have a formal evaluation, at least a pull-out of the Alzheimer families from the California Department of Public Health. So these are just our teams, and so anyway, I wanted to ask, have you ever received an assessment, in terms of hand raising? Has anyone ever had an assessment of your needs as a caregiver? kind of. Ask directly about your caregiving skills, training needs, impact on your own. Someone talked about physical issues. Are there any separate services? Support groups are probably the most likely to be in place, correct? Because those are pretty low-cost services to operate. Are there any training, counseling, legal, financial planning available to you? You're in Canada, where we're all going to move depending upon the outlet come to the next election. So I'm not going any further than that, trust me. I don't want to alienate anybody in the audience. But I am from San Francisco, so that can give you a clue. Do health and social service professionals that you interact with ask you about how you're doing? I got a yes. I got a nod because she's from Canada. Anybody else? So that's a trigger mechanism that you all might want to take note of, that if you look out of control, somebody's going to come over and try to help you from the health and social services. Yes?
The regular state assessments, which is just the regular services my son gets, they'll usually ask that question, but there is no follow-up to that.
Right.
There's no assistance in how they're going to help you with the challenges that you may have. You know, they'll listen to you, but generally speaking, with what we're doing with caregivers, there is no provision for helping them.
Correct.
I just want to make sure that my son has what he needs.
Right. Are you, what state are you in?
Arizona?
She's in Arizona, okay. Yeah. You,
I don't want to steer too far, but is that we should have in the United States a system where you don't have to have the perfect doctor. Well, that's what I was asking. Yeah, right? So and I think what this yeah, exactly. What this gets at is how do we convince the system that the system needs to invite people in who are caregivers rather than having to be the person who's always on top of the ball in addition to what you're already doing. So.
yeah. There was there's been a bill in slightly nuanced across the state, and AARP has done is really leading the charge in this, and it's called the CARE Act. And the CARE Act is to identify a family caregiver, if one is present, at the point of admission into a hospital. And that person needs to be present when discharge plans are done and that training is done. And so, you know, internally I've probably shouldn't say this because we're being streamed, but I call this the Homer Simpson law, like, duh, shouldn't it have been done already? But the fact of the matter is, it points up one of the issues that we've been looking at in terms of how our families being recognized and assessed and addressed for their own needs within the health system or the social service system. And I can say, because we've looked across you know, Medicaid waiver programs, which some of you may or may not be involved in terms of personal care services, in terms of the transitional care for high-risk individuals and so on, that, and the state, in state surveys, that the person may be identified, the caregiver may be identified, but the only question that's asked is, are they willing and able? And out of 50 states, there was really only 7 that ever assessed anybody for anything. I don't know what happened in terms of the, what happened after the assessment. But if you assess somebody, you must address it. So assessment without having something behind it, even if it's just, a knowledge of the services that are in the community, if they exist, is unconscionable for me. So these are the kinds of, I'm not totally surprised. Like I said, in the history of the caregiver support movement, it really has been driven by the Alzheimer's and sort of related dementias, but also the older adult network of services. But it's time that you all moved in, because in terms of stress and burden and needing support for your own needs, whether it's training or emotional support or access to the kind of information. I saw some of it has been developed, at least in booklet form, when I was cruising around the tables and so on. There's actually discrete services that could be offered that won't change your trajectory of your situation, but might make you feel more in control, more competent or capable, but also might give you some insights and ways in which you might want to, you can reframe or understand the situation, or give yourself permission to ask for help. There's a whole variety of things that come into play that people find benefit, not everybody. Okay, I keep losing this. Okay, I'm going to talk about care maps, but I'm going to ask that we had put the care map video on. Can I ask for the tech help? Thank you. We did a project recently, it was Robert Wood Johnson funded, called Atlas of Caregiving. And essentially it was a pilot project to see what could we find, and I can start it. Okay. Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay, just a minute. So this is an outgrowth of something that happened in the Atlas of Caregiving. The Atlas of Caregiving was really interesting because we had 14 families, and it was, there was, probably a preponderance of, there were 7 of them that really came from us, and so they were caring for somebody, an older adult. However, we did have young families with disabled children involved, and sometimes multiple kids. And so I think that was really interesting, because what we asked to do, what we wanted to do with this project was to figure out on a granular level, like on a 24-hour cycle, what people were involved in doing in terms of tasks and frequencies and so on. So there was an ethnographic survey, there was a log that families kept over a 24-hour period about what they were doing in the home, and also a bunch of technology devices, sensors, home sensor technology, wearable devices, and so on. It sounds really glamorous, but all through this, what was discovered in this process was that the technology is not there yet to really kind of make the kinds of leaps of information and data that we might like. It's just not refined as much. But the care logs and the experience of doing the care map was invaluable because it told us how fractionalized time is for all of us who do caregiving in the home. And one of the other ways in which to look at how we can figure out what's the constellation of support for families was this idea of doing a caregiver map, or mapping your care constellation. Maps in general are not that, they're not that unusual. They're starting to be done in a variety of places in a variety of ways. But what this offers is a visualization. As a result of this care mapping process, Rajiv Medha, who's on my board, and he was really the co-PI on this project, has been doing some of these workshops in the Santa Barbara area. And what we found was that families who came loved doing this. It's a very simple exercise. In my brain, I can sort of see how we can make it an app, but that's another day. But it's a very simple exercise to do, but it's a very powerful one to have in your hand for a variety of reasons. So I'm going to show this short clip, and hopefully we can hear it, because it tells you how to draw your own map, which we don't have time to actually do in an exercise presentation. By the way, this is on YouTube. You can find it, and I gave you a reference for it as well. Okay. By here?
This guy, yeah. Let's see if that works.
For key aspects of your family caregiving situation. Who's in your home? Who do you care for? Who else cares for them? And who cares for you? So here's how to draw a care map. Follow along with me as I put one together. Yours will look different, of course. No two care maps are identical, but the same basic principles apply. Okay, let's get started. I'm going to take the part of Mike, a family caregiver, so I'll begin by putting myself at the centre of the page. It's a good idea to draw little stick men and women, by the way, as it'll help bring your care map to life. So here I am, and the first question is, who's in the home? So there's me, and there's my wife Christine. My mum lives right next door to us with her dog Toby. Her home's so close that we'll draw the two enclosing circles overlapping a little. So that's who lives in our home. The next question is, who do you care for? Well, I spend a lot of time every day caring for my mother. Christine does too. We check in with her many, many times a day. The next question is, who else cares for them? Well, my mum has two home care aides, Cindy and Julie, and between them, they spend a lot of time every day looking after mum. When you add people to your care map, try to plot those who are nearby, close to the centre of the page, while people who are further afield should be placed out towards the edge of the paper. Once or twice a week, Mum goes to a daycare facility called the Oaks. But before we connect the Oaks to Mum, let's look at some other line styles to help show the frequency of caregiving. How often do people actually provide their caregiving? My wife's and my care for Mum is very often, so we'll represent this with a heavy black line. Some other people care for her daily. Others help roughly weekly, while others just provide occasional care. We'll represent these frequencies with either a continuous line, a dashed line, or a dotted line. Mum's care at the Oaks is roughly weekly, so the line between her and the daycare facility should be a dashed one. My mum has many doctors, including Dr. Ali, Dr. Miller, and Dr. Sandoval. They help as needed, so we'll show them on the care map using a dotted line to indicate that their care is on an occasional basis, and we'll use a triangle to represent someone who's a professional caregiver. My brother Steve and his wife Claire live in Philadelphia. They help Mum on occasion. My sister Maggie lives in Connecticut, and she too cares for Mum now and then. Although Mum gets lots of care from lots of people, she does do a little caregiving of her own, looking after Toby every day. My dad lives in Baltimore, and I also need to care for him on an occasional basis. My brother's a little closer to Dad geographically speaking. He cares for Dad on a weekly basis, and my sister-in-law Claire also pitches in sometimes too. Christine's parents live in Florida, and once in a while she needs to care for them. Christine's brother Patrick in St. Petersburg is closer to Orlando. He's able to be there a little more often for his parents. Christine's sister Janet is in Florida too. She can also care for Christine's parents on a weekly basis. Of course, Eileen and Jim, Christine's parents, care for each other in a very frequent way. What about Christine and I? Well, we get a lot of help from a local support group. We attend their meetings twice a month. Christine has two good friends locally. Ruth is in Princeton. She and Christine talk almost every day. Meanwhile, Angela in Plainsboro reaches out to Christine about once a week on average. And last but not least, of course, Christine and I support each other a great deal. We check in with each other many times a day. So finally, let's just introduce an idea of how far away from us all these caregivers are. If they're less than 20 minutes away, we'll say they're nearby. More than 20 minutes, but less than 2 hours away, we'll label middle distance. And everybody else who's more than 2 hours away, we'll call far away. So let's draw a line to include those who are nearby. Those who are less than 20 minutes away include Ruth, Angela, our support group, the daycare facility, Mum's doctors, and Cindy and Julie, the home care aides. Next, we'll draw in a boundary to show those who are within what we've called the middle distance. And this will include Steve and Claire, my brother and his wife in Philadelphia. Finally, everybody else we'll label as far away, as they're more than 2 hours away from us. And that's how to draw a care map. My map may look complicated to you, as you're not familiar with these people, but your own map, even if it includes many more people, will likely feel very clear to you. And it's a great way to get an overall picture of things.
So, like I said, this is it's a very simple tool to use. Oh, okay. Oops. It's a very simple tool to use, and one of the ways I think that, and you have instructions, there's a handout here, but you can also go on the Atlas of Caregiving and look at this. What I'm saying is that for many people, for many families who completed this exercise, it was actually a insights into their situation, although you all seem to have very clear insights into your caregiving situation currently. But it was an insight to folks to see, this visual presentation to understand all the people who may be involved and how infrequently, some are mostly like a lot of healthcare services. That is an infrequent visitation. It may not be so much with you all, but it is in the families that completed this. It can also help, have family, friends, and health professionals better appreciate who's involved in what they are doing. However, it doesn't get to that granular instance of what you're doing on a daily basis. That is not reflected in this. But it can also show you what's missing in terms of family and friends who could be helping, or even if there's some services out there that could help. You only need a piece of paper, a pencil, and an eraser. You don't have to have any drawing talent. Even I could do this, and I have none, because you're just using stick figures, what was displayed in the video. And there's just 3 variables in the map: people and services, frequency, and distance. But that pretty much covers the gambit. You can make it as elaborate as you want. You don't have to use any of the ways in which they were displayed here. There's many different kinds of visualizations. Whoops. Oh no. I want to get back. Sorry. There's many kinds of visualizations to this. And I think the starting point is that you can use it as a place to have a discussion with either professionals and also with other family members, because it makes such an impact on people to see this. It's not just conversation, it's really doing this visualization of what your world is like. Okay, I can go through them really quick. Okay. So the issues around there is who's indispensable for care. Most everybody probably is indispensable for care. We had a family who had 2 young children with different kinds of kind of intense care need diagnosis. And you know, the problem with getting respite, for example, for this particular family was that the instructions were so complex. So the issue of the the fact that you're indispensable really comes up to be the case, because to train somebody to do what you do on a regular basis is very time consuming, and it makes you really nervous when you're out. Unless they do have the proper training. So what would happen if you're not available? That's something that comes up quite frequently with our family caregivers. And then who's missing, who needs to be there, are key professionals missing, and so on. And is everyone else involved? One of the interesting things, the dog was there only because the mother took care of the dog, but what we discovered in many families is that there was a dog acting as a therapeutic agent. And there was one dog in particular that seemed to know who was feeling down that particular day and needed to have them go over and comfort them. And so that dog was part of the caregiving team as well. So taking action, self-awareness is a really big component of that. Share the map with those that are involved, especially professionals. And I would say, again, if you have support groups, this is a really interesting activity to do with support groups, and it will stimulate a lot of conversation. Maybe that's not your problem in support groups, but it sometimes can be. So this is more information of where you can go, both for the video and the Atlas of Caregiving, because it's another slice of what families are doing, and more information about us. So thank you very much. I think we're just about out of time, or do we have time for questions? I'm not sure.
Not anymore.
Sorry. Thank you.
Sorry, guys, we're a little out of time. I just want to say thank you to Kathleen and Grace for presenting on caring for yourself as a caregiver. If we can give one round of applause to them for presenting this awesome information.